On the 26th of September 1983, a Soviet missile early warning system lit up. One launch detected, then two, then three, then four, then five. The computers were certain. The United States had just fired 5 intercontinental ballistic missiles directly at the Soviet Union. The man staring at the screen had 9 minutes to decide whether to report it as a real attack. If he did, the Soviet military would launch everything they had in response. Hundreds of millions of people would be dead before sunrise. His name was Stanislav Petrov. He was 44 years old. He was sitting in a bunker outside Moscow, and the entire fate of civilization had just landed on one man who was only there because someone else had called in sick. It started 2 years earlier, in 1981. The KGB issued a directive unlike anything in its history. It was called Operation Ryan, an acronym for Raketno-Yadernoi Napadini, nuclear missile attack. The KGB had become convinced that the United States was planning a surprise nuclear first strike against the Soviet Union, not as a theoretical future threat, as an active, imminent plan. Soviet leadership ordered every KGB residency in the Western world to begin collecting intelligence on the signs of an incoming attack. They created a checklist. Unusual movements of U.S. military personnel, church attendance patterns changing, hospitals stockpiling blood, lights staying on overnight in government buildings in Washington. The KGB told its agents, "Watch for these signals. If you see enough of them together, the Americans are about to strike." The problem was the checklist itself. It was built on paranoia, not intelligence. The KGB was not looking for evidence of an attack. It was looking for confirmation of one it already believed was coming. And a system designed to confirm what you already believed will always find what it is looking for. In March 1983, President Reagan stood in front of a microphone and called the Soviet Union an evil empire. 6 days later, he announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, a program to build a space-based missile shield that could intercept Soviet nuclear warheads in flight. In Moscow, this was not heard as a defense program. It was heard as preparation. If you could shoot down every Soviet missile after launching your own, a first strike suddenly became survivable. To the men in the Kremlin who had lived through the Second World War, who had watched 27 million Soviet citizens die, Reagan's speech was not a policy announcement. It was a declaration of intent. KGB officers across Europe were ordered to accelerate their Ryan reporting. The intelligence coming back was contradictory, incomplete, and in some cases fabricated. Field agents sending back what headquarters wanted to hear rather than what they were actually seeing. But it all fed into the same machine, and the machine kept pointing in the same direction. In November 1983, NATO began a routine military exercise called Able Archer 83. It was designed to simulate a coordinated nuclear release, the exact sequence of commands that would be used if NATO decided to launch nuclear weapons. The exercise was realistic by design. That was the point. It involved actual radio silence, actual encrypted communications, actual changes in military alert levels. It looked, from the outside, exactly like what the KGB had been trained to look for. KGB stations across Europe began reporting that this was not an exercise. Soviet military intelligence, the GRU, reached the same conclusion. Warsaw Pact forces in East Germany were quietly moved to heightened readiness. Soviet air units in Poland and East Germany were placed on alert. Armed aircraft, pilots on standby, runways cleared. The Soviet Union was preparing to launch a preemptive strike against a NATO exercise it had mistaken for the real thing. The mistake was not a technical error. It was years of institutional paranoia finally colliding with reality. Which brings us back to Stanislav Petrov. 2 months before Able Archer, on that September night, he was the duty officer at Serpukhov 15, the Soviet command center responsible for processing satellite data from the early warning system. The system was called OKO. It was brand new. It had not been fully tested under operational conditions. When the alert came through, 5 missiles, inbound, launched from the United States. Petrov had to make a judgment call that the entire system's design said he should not have to make. The protocol was clear. Report the alert up the chain. Let the generals decide. He did not report it. He picked up the phone and told his superiors it was a false alarm. He had no proof. The computers were still showing an active launch. His reasoning was this: if the United States was going to start a nuclear war, they would not fire 5 missiles. They would fire 500. A first strike that small made no strategic sense. It was the logic of a man thinking clearly in a room full of screaming alarms. He was right. A satellite had misread sunlight reflecting off clouds over Montana as missile exhaust plumes. 5 Phantom rockets. No launch had ever occurred. Petrov was not celebrated. He was quietly reprimanded for failing to properly document the incident in his logbook during the crisis. He was reassigned. He retired from the Soviet military, took a job as an engineer, and spent years living in a small flat outside Moscow. The Soviet government classified the entire incident. The existence of Operation Ryan was not officially acknowledged for years after the Cold War ended. The CIA later admitted they had no idea how close Able Archer 83 had come to triggering a genuine Soviet response. It was Oleg Gordievsky, the KGB officer who had been secretly working for British intelligence, who first told the West how seriously Moscow had taken it. Without Gordievsky inside the KGB, the West might never have known how close it came. The mistake was not Petrov's. The mistake was Ryan itself. The Soviet Union built a system designed to detect an American first strike, and in doing so, created the conditions under which a first strike was most likely to happen. An intelligence apparatus so primed for confirmation that it could not distinguish between a war game and a war. A chain of command so terrified of missing a real attack that it nearly launched one in response to nothing. The most dangerous nuclear moment since the Cuban Missile Crisis was not caused by aggression. It was caused by fear and a bureaucracy that had forgotten how to question what it was afraid of. Stanislav Petrov died in 2017. For most of his life, almost nobody knew his name. The man who may have saved civilization spent his final years alone in a flat in Fryazevo. He said in interviews that he did not consider himself a hero. He had simply done what seemed logical. But logic, on the night of the 26th of September 1983, was the rarest thing in the world.